pullback very clearly in the Gogra-Hotsprings petrol point 15 area. We've previously seen Pangong being cleared. Has enough, we've seen the Galwan pullback as well. Has enough happened on the ground, do you think, for the two principles to meet?
First of all, I don't think the principles meeting is an end state that is sort of valid in itself. Whether they meet or they don't meet, it's the position on the ground that we need to be worried about at this point in time. And what we find that India has done over these successive rounds of senior military commanders' talks is that we have one by one conceded all the advantages that we've had, starting from the Kailash range. Now this 1 kilometer that China has pulled back in the hot springs area, in Galwan we pulled back, and in Depsang and in Demchok, the two key areas where China has taken an advantage. They are deep inside Indian territory and are displaying no inclination to pull back or even talk about pulling back. So, just talking in itself doesn't do anything for India. The second thing is, it appears that Prime Minister Modi is on exactly the same wavelength as Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping says the PLA has not entered Indian territory. Prime Minister Modi has said exactly the same thing, that the PLA has not entered Indian territory. There seems to be a sort of a congruence of views between the two leaders. But that is because there has been a difficult sort of position faced by India. Depsang is a clear case where the Chinese have not pulled back and are showing no inclination of pulling back. They're not even talking about it. So I think that there's absolutely no point talking to the Chinese. We need to reinforce our borders. We need to put in troops so that we make sure that it never happens again in the manner that it has this time. And, talking to the Chinese is not going to be...
Okay, Sushant, Sareen, Ajai Shukla says no point talking to Xi Jinping. India is conceding whatever advantages we had, and there is no inclination of a PLA pullback in either Depsang or Demchok, and therefore Modi shouldn't meet Xi. Sushant, Sareen.
So one, I think, while I agree with what Ajay said on some of the issues, but on the Depsang issue, number one, I think the intrusions took place long back. They were not the same intrusions which took place in 2020. And I think the 2020 thing has more or less been cleared, albeit not exactly to India's advantage. And I don't think the status quo ante has been restored in the way it was, in the sense that I think some of the areas where we were patrolling now become buffer areas, and we are not going to be patrolling up to those points. So which in a sense means that the LAC, in a manner of speaking, has been delineated in that particular sector. But having said that, should we meet Xi or not? Number one, if there is a proposal to meet, I don't see any harm in meeting Xi Jinping. The only thing is, I think we have to recognize China is not a Pakistan. I think we need to keep lines of communication open with the Chinese. Unlike the Pakistanis, with whom you will never really get anything out of them, and there is virtually nothing that comes to the table from the Pakistanis to India. The other aspect of this is that you have to look at the fact that the foreign ministers have been meeting regularly. I think they've had at least 3 or 4 meetings, not only in India but also outside India. So I don't see any real problem between the two principals meeting. But at the same time, I think the Indian position need to be made very, very clear. I don't see any reason why we should only be looking for a compromise all the time, because a compromise doesn't necessarily work in our favor.